Nothing like a bit of ASMR to get the video going. Now, before we start getting into the details, I know what you must be thinking. 50 millimeters in diameter, it's over 20 millimeters thick. I cannot wear this watch, you say to yourself. And I'm in agreement. I mean, a small percentage will only be able to really enjoy this watch on their wrists. But there is something really significant about this piece that needs to be investigated and talked about. So let's get into it. The depth measuring competition continues, and Rolex has just given us the Deepsea Challenge Sea Dweller. This is a seriously technical dive watch for a lot of reasons, and it is a first in many other categories. But before getting into the specifications, I'm in touch with a good friend who is Royal Navy diver. He's been a saturation diver for many years. He has seen a lot of things in the ocean. I believe he has spent more time of his life in the sea than he has on land. When I shared the story of this launch with him, he said to me, the Western Basin, the Mariana Trench, it was clocked recently at 10.998 meters. 11K, 11,000 meters is FOD, full ocean depth. So at this point in time, the deepest level in the ocean that has been discovered is 11,000 meters. And this could vary by 10 meters, maybe even 100 meters, but 11,000 seems to be the highest rating at this stage. So what makes this deep sea special is it's commercially available, anyone can have it, but it can also travel as far down to the known limits of our ocean. That is insane. Now, there's so much competition between Rolex and Omega, and we've seen, by 2012, the Deep Sea Challenge happened. James Cameron took his submersible down, and that watch reached 10,000 plus meters. And the process of developing a sea dweller to be capable of doing this job, they had all sorts of new technologies included, like the ring lock system, which is quite ingenious, pretty unique. And to counter Rolex's production model of the time, Omega just recently brought out the Ultra Deep, which travels down to 6,000 meters, as it is ludicrous as a depth rating. Rolex has in essence just doubled that number. The question then to ask, once you reach the limit of depth, where else can you go? If we're talking about space, there's always further distances you could travel, but you know that the sea floor is finite. And what do you do next? Now, some of you who've been following the channel for a while might know that I actually did a video on this exact subject about a leaked, rumored, speculative thought that the Sea Dweller would be coming out in titanium this year. Instead of being released in September, it was 2 months later, but here we are. So a lot of what I mentioned in that video does stand here. For the first time, RLX titanium is being used for the entirety of a watch. Now, normally that titanium was only reserved for the case backs of the deep seas, would you believe? But this is quite a new venture for them. What makes it special is it's not only their own proprietary material, but it's also grade 5 titanium, which is far better rated and far more appreciated. Titanium in a dive watch, as I've said so many times, is a brilliant material, hypoallergenic, but more importantly, in salt water, which is the harshest water there is when it comes to looking after a mechanical object, it's completely corrosive resistant. Titanium is prone to oxidation, but it's nothing like what you see with brass and bronze and many other metals. And that's what I really like about this piece, because when you're wearing it, you won't feel the heft of it. The watch probably weighs about a third of what it would weigh if it was in full steel. So even though it is 50 millimeters in diameter, over 20 mils thick, it'll still wear pretty well. What I can also really appreciate about this piece is that it's not complicated. It's extremely sophisticated, but it's also simple. And that's down to it having a matte dial, no date complication, a thinner movement inside, meaning that the case thickness can be brought down. But this new model also has a helium escape valve, which is quite interesting, and I'm wondering if that's even necessary with a watch like this. But the numbers, just overkill. I mean, the sapphire crystal by itself is 9.5 millimeters. That's basically 1 centimeter thick. A lot of watch cases today don't even measure that thick. The bezel of the watch is highly polished, the dial is matte black. I would have preferred to have seen the bezel in matte as well to just correspond with the titanium finish. All of those surfaces should be unpolished just for the sake of added legibility, especially when you're in the water. You don't want anything to reflect. But if you look to the side of the case, there's also a new first, fully brushed flanks. They've brought back chamfers to the side of the case, which is a welcome adjustment we haven't seen for a very long time. Looks fantastic. If we look to the trip-lock crown system, it now has a dash in the middle, which indicates that it's a titanium metal, as far as I know. So we're not dealing with a watch here that's flashy, that has anything truly new introduced. It's just a better upgrade of what it was before. It's bigger, beefier, it's using a more advanced material. Aesthetically, on the outside, it still manages to kind of look elegant. I think the jury is still not out on that one. But it's that celebration of the anniversary of James Cameron's venture down to the bottom of the trench. After these few years, they now have a commercially available dive watch that can travel to that exact same depth and even more. Something that has surprised me from the press photos I've been seeing so far is that the brushing on the bracelet and on the titanium itself seems quite harsh. I feel like this is just a prototype, this is not an official production model just yet. But seeing those lines across the bracelet, it looks quite aggressive, and I think that will be fixed by the time we see actual production models, maybe going up another 100 grit in sandpaper. So the question remains, the gold standard has been reached, the lowest depth possible has been achieved. Can we now have this as a set standard and move on from here? Can we now reach that point and look to other ventures? Or is Omega now going to counter with a watch that can travel further than recorded depth? I don't know anymore. I'm lost for words. I think it's important to point out that the thickness of these cases, it's done for a reason. This is the only time when the thickness of a case is truly there for a practical purpose. If it was any smaller, it wouldn't be able to take the pressure of that kind of depth. Now yes, this watch could measure 36 millimeters in diameter and have a case thickness of over 20 millimeters. But in order to balance out those proportions and scales, they've had to blow it up to 50 millimeters in diameter, just so it looks kind of appropriate and balanced. The thickness of these watches, it's not about aesthetics, it's about structural rigidity. The ring lock system is actually quite fascinating. It's a very simple principle. The ring acts as a wider footprint, greater surface area for the crystal to push against when outside forces put pressure on it. Now what's quite interesting when we compare it to Omega's Ultra Deep, they don't use this system. They have liquid metal technology. They seem to have a better system that allows for that crystal to stay put, as well as the fact that they don't include a helium escape valve. I think they believe that their cases are far more hermetically sealed. And that's really what it boils down to at the end of the day, engineering. If your case is so well hermetically sealed that it doesn't require all of this external technology, you don't need it. I don't know if the helium escape valve is just a novelty, a bit of a callback to the original Sea Dwellers and the technology that was involved in that process, because that was all about keeping the crystals from popping out. We're at a point now where these cases are so well developed, so well engineered with such tight tolerances, I don't think these external systems are required. And if we circle back to the beginning again, what makes this watch so great is its simplicity, is the fact that it presents like any other Rolex Submariner, any other Sea Dweller. And for the first time, dive watch enthusiasts can throw on a watch that communicates subtly, or not so subtly, that it can travel further than the deepest known point on the Earth. I've seen a lot of discourse, a lot of people critiquing this watch saying that this is Rolex losing its way, this is not them, this is ridiculous. I look at it now and think, this is class. It's a brand that's not bragging about the fact that their watch can travel now further than any other dive watch ever has. But it's communicating this in the most humble way possible. Titanium, not a flashy metal. It's not using bright spot colors, it's not using yellow gold, it's not using blue accents, it's not using anything, nothing related to the Deepsea Challenger, no Kawasaki green, a matte black dial with no date, and a huge number that accompanies it. And this is what I think separates Rolex from the pack. Yes, they have their moments of giving us oddities and crazy color combinations. Most recently, left-hand drives and crown guards on watches that don't really need them. But then they can do something like this. Something that when we step back and look at it could say, minimal effort, they've hardly put any energy into this. But that's kind of the point. It's a sleeper of sorts. It's the kind of animal that you would find at the bottom of the ocean that expends virtually no energy while it lives down there, but capable of withstanding insane pressures at depths that we can't even fathom ourselves. And serious dive enthusiasts now for the first time can wear a watch that communicates that it can go as deep as the deepest place in the planet. It's been a long day.